John McMullen will be in studio for all 4 hours as we'll dive into the final Week 5 look back, and a lot to get into today, John. Let's start with today's press conference where Doug Peterson addressed a bevy of things, one of which was the officiating in yesterday's game, and he took the high road, I guess, here. But yesterday he did kind of indicate that, hey, it was tough. There was a lot of calls that were tough to overcome. I'll ask you this. I said this last hour, John. 14 penalties. I don't care if all 14 are legit. 14-2 is egregious. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's not good. The disparity is the bigger problem for me, and I say that about all sports. I see it in the NBA quite a bit. When you see a huge foul disparity, you can pretty much say it's a badly officiated game. In the case yesterday, Detroit comes in as the third most penalized team in football, and all of a sudden it's 14-2 in their direction. It was strange. But as I wrote today on 973ESPN.com, there's nothing you can do about it. It's going to happen to you throughout the season at times, and all you can do is persevere. And I think from that standpoint, Doug was very, very happy because that's a game they still should have won. And I think that says something about the growth of this team and the organization. Instead of just folding up tents and saying it's not our day, the Eagles fought and still had a chance to win it in the end.
Normally it's you taking shots at Chip Kelly. It sounded like Doug Peterson was doing it today, where he said last year we would have folded the tent. It shows you how far we've come.
Yeah, I don't know if that was a shot. I know everyone took it like that, but I don't think so.
I'm half kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean, no, you're not the only one who brought that up. A lot of people brought it up. I just don't think he cares. He wasn't involved with this organization. I think he was just talking about watching the film. Obviously, as the head coach, he watched last year's games, and they gave up at times. And did some players give up on Chip Kelly? There's no question about it. And from that standpoint, it's a big improvement because they want to play for Doug Peterson. However, that was, late in Chip Kelly's reign. So, as you know, I'd like to take my shots, but the first 2 years he was here, nobody was giving up on Chip, but everyone just kind of saw the writing on the wall last year.
Hey, I want to get your take on a couple of key points of yesterday's game, but one, your take on Bradham sitting out and him trying to kind of say that was the plan. Were they punishing him, or was that their plan?
Well, I will say it seemed that way watching the game, but then as you watch it afterwards and kind of look at each particular play and where he was, it did seem like a rotational thing, because if you're going to penalize him, you would sit him out for the first half or a theory. I think just for once, Jim Schwartz kind of outthought himself, and he looked at Detroit on paper, and we talked about it on the show last week. One of the most difficult matchups they have, and one of the most difficult matchups in all of football, is Theo Riddick. And they looked at their roster and said Mychal Kendricks is the most athletic linebacker they have, which he is, and they hope that he could do the best job on him. And it's just not working for Mychal Kendricks. And it has nothing to do with his physical ability or his skill set. He's just not a very instinctive player. And I think Jim made a mistake. He wanted the most athletic guy out there, and it didn't work, even though Nigel is not as athletically gifted. He's just got a better feel for the game, and he's better in pass coverage than Mychal Kendricks. And I think he learned that lesson in Detroit.
John, let's look at Jim Schwartz. And you look at the first half defensively, I felt like the Eagles, and Schwartz in particular, were outcoached. I thought that the Lions had a very good game plan and had an idea of how to get around that Eagles defense. Clearly, Schwartz made great adjustments in the first half, at halftime, to get a better product out there in the second half. How did you view the first half from Schwartz? Where do you put that whole thing? And did you agree that perhaps he was outcoached there?
Well, a little bit, and as I said, I thought he outthought himself with taking Bradham off the field and putting Kendricks off. And then part of it, I think, is a market correction. I mean, this is a team that hadn't given up a passing touchdown in the first 3 weeks. That's just not sustainable. That's just not – it's great. It's tremendous that they were able to perform at that kind of level through the first 3 games, but you have to be realistic about it. Eventually, it was going to happen, and you hope it's not going to happen with 3 in the first half, but the positives from that are the adjustments, as you mentioned, Scott, and I don't necessarily think Jim was out-coached, because one of the things, and he mentioned it last week, hey, Matthew Stafford is more athletic than people give him credit for, and he was able to extend plays, and I'm sure he told that to his defensive line. I just think they weren't as disciplined as they usually are in the first half, and he probably got him in the locker room and said, look, if you guys don't stay in your pass rushing lanes, he's going to hurt you. And I think that was one of the major adjustments, but it's not like he didn't make them aware of that before the game started. Sometimes it comes down to execution, and that front 4 just didn't execute in the first half.
John, how about your take on the Ryan Mathews play call? Were you okay with that? And then also the referee's call of that it wasn't a dead ball and that the Lions got possession?
Well, it should have been a dead ball, and it should have been the Eagles' possession, but that's what happens. And that doesn't mean Ryan Mathews on the play call should have an outside run to the right. He shouldn't have the football in his left hand. So just because – if you don't put the football on the ground, Pete, you don't give Pete Morelli and his crew a chance to make a mistake. That's the bottom line. That's how Doug, I think, frames it and realizes it. As for the play call, it didn't work. I didn't have a problem with it. You want to keep the ball on the ground. You want to keep the clock moving. If Ryan Mathews does his job, even if they lose yardage, there's a Donnie Jones punt, and then they got to go the length of the field. So I didn't have a problem with the play call. Necessarily. The call on the field from a referee standpoint was wrong, touched Jason Kelce. But from a video standpoint, there wasn't indisputable proof. So what Dean Blandino explained is, hey, if on the field they called it a dead ball, it would have been upheld. So the key aspect was the official on the field making a mistake, and there's nothing he can do about that.
How about at the end of the game, or at least the last play for the Eagles, when Carson Wentz decided to go for the home run ball when they had it back with 1:28 left rather than maybe dink and dunk the way down the field?
Well, I had no issue with it, except for the fact that Carson's got to learn that Nelson Agholor is not a good receiver, and he can't throw 50-50 balls to Nelson Agholor. That's my biggest issue with the decision. And he jumped on his sword. And that's what leaders do, and I'll learn from it. And at some point, hopefully this team improves at the receiver position, and you don't have to worry about things like that. But I have no issues whatsoever on him trying to make a play at that point in the game. If you catch Darius Slay napping, because he doesn't think he can get the ball that far down the field, it could possibly work. And again, a decent receiver at the bare minimum is going to fight for that football. It's going to be an incomplete pass, and you're going to play second down. Or, best case scenario, you get a pass interference call, as Doug Peterson said yesterday. That's a bad play by Nelson Agholor. That's the bottom line as far as that play goes.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. I had kind of said the same thing early, John, in the show, that I don't have a problem taking a shot on that play because they haven't shown that all year. I mean, they really haven't. He threw the ball 50 yards down the field. That's not something they have shown where you got to start to ask yourself after 3 weeks, do the Eagles start to look very, follow a lot of trends? Did Doug Peterson, was he creative enough yesterday? Because we've given him a lot of praise for his play calling through the first 3 games, but yesterday seemed a lot more predictable.
Well, I mean, they've been very cautious. One of the reasons Carson didn't throw interceptions is because generally they have been playing with the lead. and they haven't been taking a ton of shots down the field. And that's part of the process of sort of building up the confidence of a rookie quarterback. So I'm not going to criticize it at this point. I'm also not going to criticize Carson for taking the shot. It was his third read on the play. The first two were taken away, and he had man-on-man coverage. He read it right. He went in the right direction. He possibly could have thrown the football a little bit more inside, maybe a half yard or so. But, I mean, as you mentioned, Mike, that ball's 50 yards down the field. That's nitpicking. At that point, your receiver, as I said, on a 50-50 ball, if that's, hey, throw out the name. If that's Julio Jones, if that's Antonio Brown, if that's A.J. Green, if that's Jordan Mathews, forget about the superstars, that ball's not getting intercepted. And that's not to take anything away from Slay, who made a tremendous play on the ball and is a very good player. It's just the reality of a cornerback, and realize cornerbacks are playing cornerback for a reason. And if you watch that play, Slay looks like the receiver, and Agholor looks like the corner desperately trying to find the football in the air. At some point, somebody's got to call that kid out to task. He's just not performing at the level you expect a first-round wide receiver to perform at. And he's a nice kid, and I wish the light would go off for him, but that was just egregious on his part.
Hey, John, I found it interesting today that Doug almost spoke when he was talking about Lane Johnson's injury as if he anticipated him. Oh, he'll be fine. We think he'll be ready to go. He's going to practice on Wednesday. It almost sounds like they think Lane has a shot to play again this week.
Well, I mean, that's the mentality they've taken, is the fact that until they hear he's suspended, he's the starting right tackle. So I think he's just going with that as sort of the way the organization has decided to handle this. It's generally 7 to 10 days. 7 days will be tomorrow, Tuesday. 10 days will be Friday. So if it takes 10 days, he's going to be available for Wednesday. And if he's available for practice and he's healthy, they're going to put him out there. But I think they understand that's kind of unlikely he's going to be able to play Sunday. I think the bigger news is that he confirmed that Big V is going to be there at right tackle, and that's going to be the way they go instead of what they had planned all along, and that was to kick Alan Barber outside.
Hey, real quick, before we go around the league a little bit here, I know tomorrow we'll really dive deeper into all the games after tonight's Monday Nighter is in the book. We'll have who's in, who's out at 3:30 on tomorrow's show. Vinny Curry, he's a guy who got 5 years, $47 million in the offseason. A lot of people thought he would be a big factor on this defense. 16 of 61 snaps yesterday. Barwin 52, Graham 53. What's wrong with Curry? He was a guy that anticipated big things from.
Well, I think part of it is that Brand has just played at such a high level he can't get on the field at times. And I don't know if this organization expected that. And if they didn't, I don't know why, to be honest, because I think Brandon has made it clear, despite the fact early in his career the narrative was that he was a bust and the Eagles should have taken Jason Pierre-Paul. But that has slowly drifted away. And even past a couple years under Chip Kelly, when he's playing out of position, he turned into a really, really good football player. And now that you're back in the 4-3, which suits his talents far more than playing the 3-4 outside linebacker, he's turned into their best defensive end. And I think, I not only think, I know they came into the off-season work thinking he was the third best defensive end behind Connor Barwin and Vinny Curry. And he was going to be the third man in the rotation. And basically, since day one, he's outplayed both of those guys. And he's really been right there with Fletcher Cox and Jordan Hicks as one of the best overall defenders on this team. So if he's playing at that level, it's just silly to take him off the field.
Yeah, John McMullen's with us. Don't forget to check out John's quick hits after every Eagles game on 97.3 ESPN.com and get his instant reactions on these games. And, of course, the Eagles with their first loss. And they're going to go down to Washington next week, John, and you start to look at the Redskins, who won yesterday in Baltimore. All of a sudden, is our perception changing a bit of the Skins?
A little bit. It's interesting how things change so quickly in the NFL, because they were minutes away from starting 0-3 before they came back on the Giants, and all of a sudden you fast forward and they're right back into things in the NFC East. So I think if you look at the Eagles' schedule, as great as this start has been, 3-1, I think while people are disappointed today, I think if you told them you'd give them 3-1 before the season started, they would have signed up for that. But this is very, very important, because you look at the next week and Minnesota comes in. Dallas is a much better team than anyone expected with Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott. So the upcoming schedule is a lot more difficult than the first month was, minus Pittsburgh, of course. But even Pittsburgh, remember, it was a Steelers team without Le'Veon Bell. So I think this is a very important game for the Eagles. And we'll see how they handle it, because obviously it's a road game. It's a tough environment. But I think they have the talent to get it done, and we'll talk more as the week goes on. But this is a very important week for the Eagles, and it could be one of those linchpin games which turn the season going in a positive direction or trend it into a negative direction.
Yeah, no doubt. You look inside the NFC East, Washington wins, Dallas wins. Dallas, very impressive, and one thing I've been asking them to do a lot more, John, hey, you got this great line, run the football. And yesterday, in the last couple of games, I think they have gotten to become a more nasty offensive line, as opposed to in year like last year. I mean, you have backup quarterbacks and they're trying to win games through the air. You got that line, use it. And the last couple of weeks, I've been impressed with their play calling.
Yeah, I've been very impressed, and that was a big game for me with the Cowboys, because I wanted to see them against the Cincinnati defense, because they're known, dating back to when Mike Zimmer was there, to be very, very disciplined up front as far as the front seven goes. And then you have Geno Atkins, who's one of those defensive tackles that penetrates tremendously and can blow up running plays. You have Vontaze Perfect, who's a very, very instinctive linebacker who sort of finds the football really, really quickly. It's generally very difficult to run against the Cincinnati Bengals, and they just ripped them apart. They just shredded them. So that was scary. If I'm the Philadelphia Eagles or the Washington Redskins or the New York Giants, that was scary because they don't have run defenses like the Cincinnati Bengals do, and the Cowboys just dominated. So that was a very, very impressive performance by the Cowboys.
They have a very intriguing decision coming up. I mean, Jerry Jones continues to say Romo's the guy, but how do you do that?
I think he's nuts if he takes Dak Prescott out of the lineup if he continues to play at this level. This is a young man's game. And if you're being honest, I think I said it last week on the show, and you ask yourself, what at this stage does a 36-year-old Tony Romo do better than Dak Prescott? The only thing you can point to is the experience level and the fact that a veteran's not going to make the game-changing mistakes, but Dak hasn't done that. So if he's not making mistakes, you got to be crazy to pull the trigger on that move. You got to ride this as long as you possibly can. That's the future of your organization. Tony Romo's your past. If he continues to play at this level, I don't even think Jerry Jones is crazy enough to make that move at this point. I think he's trying to be deferential to Tony Romo, and I understand that because he's done a lot for that organization. But they'll do it in a political fashion. They'll say, hey, we want to make sure Tony's 100%. He came back too early last time. We're going to be very, very cautious. And then if Dak has a 4-interception game or plays really, really bad, then he can revisit it. But if he continues to play at this level, there's no way you can go back to Tony Romo.
All right, good stuff from John. He'll be in studio tomorrow for the full show where we will have total coverage of Week 5 in the NFL. Last one for you, John. Last night, the Giants have now lost 3 in a row, and they were kind of clunky on offense again. This was a team that we thought the offense would be fine, defense would be better. What's wrong with the Giants now in the 3-game streak? 3-game losing streak, I should say.
Well, I think we overrated them offensively, especially at the wide receiver position. Beckham is tremendous when he's playing well, and he didn't let the emotions get to him last night. But obviously people pay a ton of attention to him. And I mentioned that the injury Victor Cruz suffered, ironically, in Philadelphia here, it was catastrophic. He's not the same player. He's not the same guy physically. So people expecting the great receiver before, and they assumed, hey, he's back on the field. Why isn't he going to be Victor Cruz? He's not. He's not Victor Cruz physically. He's never going to be Victor Cruz again. And he's a below-average receiver at this point. And then Sterling Shepard is, let's face it, he's a rookie second-round pick. He's got some upside, but people who are expecting him to be some kind of a star right out of the gates, they're being ridiculous about it. So I think people overrated the talent. And then don't sleep on the fact that Eli Manning has been tremendously inaccurate. Now, granted, his last 2 games are against Minnesota and Green Bay, who really got after him. But he's aging as well, and he's on the decline as a player. So right now the Giants are in last place in the NFC East, and that's probably where they belong right now, because right now they're the worst team in the division.
All right, more tomorrow, and we'll have plenty on Week 5 of the NFL, including Tom Brady making a pretty interesting debut yesterday as he returned to the league, and all of the Week 5 big storylines. That's tomorrow right here on the Sports Bash, where John joins us in the studio for the full show. Thanks, pal.
Hey, thanks, guys.